Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Marketeer. I'm your host, Stephanie Beach, founder and CEO of SMB Media Consulting. And today we're joined by Carrie Sporer, the co-founder of SWAIR, an innovative hair design, an innovative hair care design. Sorry, again. See, I always fumble. This is why we record. Okay. Carrie Sporer, the co-founder of SWAIR, an innovative hair care brand design for the active lifestyle. In today's conversation, I'm very excited. We're going to talk about Carrie and her journey from the fashion industry to an entrepreneur, revealing the inspiration behind SWAIR and how she navigated early challenges, her strategic approach to breaking through a saturated market, and all of the partnership dynamics that comes with it. Her insights will offer some very valuable lessons anyone looking to build a successful consumer brand in today's competitive landscape. Hi, Carrie. Thanks for being here. I'm so excited. How are you?
Thank I'm great, thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, so I'd love to get started with a little bit about your background and experience. I think it's very interesting that you came from the fashion industry and became, an e-com entrepreneur. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so when I look back at the journey, it feels very linear, but I think when I was going through it, it felt kind of chaotic. I spent most of my career selling luxury accessories around the world on the wholesale angle, which was incredible when I was in my 20s and just, bopping around on planes to different points of sale and, going to Fashion Week and all of the glamorous stuff. But then when I became a mom, I decided that I did not want to be traveling as much and started doing freelance work within the fashion industry. And I met all of these amazing female founders that had started brands that were a bit outside of their skill set. And I had thought that anybody who had started a beauty brand was formulating with like potions and beakers and test tubes in their kitchen or bathroom before starting the brand. And it was really when I was consulting, I learned just a lot about contract manufacturing throughout all industries. And I had the personal problem of dealing with sweaty hair. Over the years, I had become a very avid runner and hated washing my hair every time I worked out. And I just had this itch that needed to be scratched, which I feel like most entrepreneurs can relate to that feeling that there was no solution for cleaning very sweaty hair quickly when your hair is too sweaty for dry shampoo. So I had a flexible schedule. And then when COVID hit, I had all the time in the world, save for, raising two children, but had a lot more time to really start looking into different contract manufacturers and labs to help me bring this dream product to life. And after working in fashion with, every season, 4 times a year, you're reinventing the wheel and constantly evolving. I was like, if I can think of something that is a little bit more of an evergreen product, or I don't have to move that quickly, I'd really be interested in starting the business myself. So that's kind of how it all started, from being in-house selling luxury accessories to Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf Goodman to now having my own hair care brand for people who work out.
That's really an amazing story. And I think, with entrepreneurs especially, you always find a need for something, and it usually comes out of personal experience. So I definitely love that. I think it's really interesting, like, and maybe we can go into a little bit more of like how the process works and like what did you do to create something? Obviously, okay, you have this problem, you work out, you have very sweaty hair, especially as a runner. I used to run, I used to do spin, and same thing, I know it sounds funny, but as women, we train our hair to not have to wash it every day because it's not necessarily healthy for our hair, you know? So I do the same thing and I do work out. And when I would run or I would spin, your scalp, you sweat and you can't really help that. And having to wash your hair or dry shampoo doesn't always work. And so taking that and figuring out, okay, how am I going to make this better or different? is really interesting to me. And how, first let's get into a little bit about more what SWAIR is and how it's different from dry shampoo. I think we should hit that a little earlier on, but also how did you go about finding the right formula to take it beyond what dry shampoo is and does? Because it's also, I've used the product, I bought the product, my daughter loves the product after soccer and things. Like it's not like typical dry shampoo where you feel buildup or you feel like it's weighing your hair down. It's very light and it's unique to how you use it too, which is a little different than dry shampoo. So let's get into that as well.
Yeah, so I think the fact that the product is different from dry shampoo, so we call it showerless shampoo. And basically, I like to equate it to that quick clean cycle on your washing machine or dishwasher.
I love
So
that.
you are spraying the product on your hair like you would a dry shampoo, but it's actually the consistency of water. It's not this chalky or powdery product. And then the big differentiator is the behavior. And then you towel dry your hair, and the way the formula interacts with your hair when you towel dry it, you're actually physically removing the dirt and the sweat. So you are cleaning your hair in a way that you don't with dry shampoo, where you're just adding more product to temporarily mask the dirt or the oil. So you're removing the dirt and the sweat from your hair, and you're actually left with like a cleaner base, as opposed to a dry shampoo where you're layering on additional product, which never made sense to me. And if you've ever tried dry shampoo on any real amount of sweat, it basically turns to slime. It's not a good experience.
It's not. And then, then you're in the shower and you're trying to scrub it out, or, there's buildup and then you get flakes, or, it's not always healthy. I mean, we use it, we do what we got to do, and it is what it is. But I really do like that for very sweaty hair, this is actually removing the dirt and the oil, and not necessarily just masking it. And it's not very perfumey or anything like that either, but it does take the odor away. Um, how did you come up with a formula for that? Or what was the process to find, how many iterations did it take?
So in the beginning, we put together a brief, which it was pre-Chat GPT, but now that we're developing more products, I'll be very honest, I often use Chat GPT to help create briefs for product development. But we put together basically a proposal of what we would like a final product to look, feel, and smell like. And we also, and I say we because I have a co-founder, Meredith, who's involved in the process. And we went into our own bathrooms, and we were starting to gravitate towards clean beauty products. And unfortunately, most of the better performing dry shampoos are terrible for you. So we were looking at the no lists on the products that we were buying. And we just added that no, like we made a master no list, truly and embarrassingly, like not even having any idea what some of these things are. I'm like, okay, well, I was using Briogeo shampoo and they don't have sulfates or paraben. So I added that to my no list with, and then Googled after. Like it was a little bit backward. But we, starting a beauty brand in 2020, we knew that it had to be clean beauty there, to be, effective and to resonate with the customer. So we put together what we wanted the product to do and what we wanted to omit from the formulation. And we started Googling labs. Google your way to success is a big part of entrepreneurship, and submitting our brief to them to see if they were interested in working with us. And people were either incredibly expensive or said, we have a great dry shampoo. We make dry shampoo for blah, blah, blah. We can put your name on it. And we're like, we don't want dry shampoo. And of the dozens of labs we reached out to, there were only two that came back to us that were like, we understand that you want something different and we're willing to formulate for you for a low fee to cover our costs and try something different. And one of them was in California, and one of them was, I'm based on the East Coast, and one of them was on the East Coast and could easily be a day trip. And we decided to start formulating with the lab that was just closer so that we could go there, shake hands, meet everybody, smell the scents, take a peek behind the manufacturing line. And that's really how we made the decision. Most of it was made for us by most people just opting out and leaving us with two choices. And we just went for the more practical one.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense. And it's really great that it worked out that way and that somebody was willing to take a chance and do something different. I hate when people always try to just fit you in the box that fits for them. But starting your own product in a beauty brand isn't easy. What are some of the challenges or unexpected, hurdles that you faced during the beginning time and how did you navigate them?
Well, I'm sure you can relate on the press side. Things are just, you can plan incredibly well, and surprises always happen. So, as an entrepreneur in any industry, you just have to be a firefighter because you will plan out your day, you will have your meetings, you will have your to do list, but most of the time you're pushing that off the desk and just fighting whatever fire happens that day. So, for example, about 3 weeks before we were supposed to launch, and we had launched a press lined up, we had embargoes, we had the whole thing, a wait list, everything that a brand could want. And then we get a phone call from our lab. And normally we just get emails. So immediately I'm like, oh gosh, why are they picking up the phone? And there had been a contamination at the lab and they needed to dump 5,000. And when I say dump, I mean responsibly recycle 5,000 of our 6,000 units that we had ordered for launch.
Oh my gosh.
So it was incredibly stressful. And I think if I did not have a co-founder, I just would have been like, okay, thanks, bye, and like hung up and nobody would ever hear me there. But luckily, because we did choose a good partner, they were excellent in helping taking financial responsibility so that when we had to reorder packaging and labels, they funded the bill for that, which was incredible because we would have been out of business before we started had we been financially responsible. We did have to push back launch by about 6 weeks, and everyone really hustled and we didn't get our first choice packaging. We had, because it was during COVID when we launched, and so many companies were making like surface sprays and sanitizers, recyclable PET plastic bottles were very hard to come by. So we were not able to launch with our first choice that we had gone into initial production with, but we made it work. We, settled for plan B, and no one was the wiser because they hadn't seen the product before.
Right.
And, I'm sure doing PR, you had to call up different publications and say, we need to push back that date you were supposed to go
Yeah.
live with that story. So luckily, everyone was a really good partner, but emotionally, it was incredibly stressful. And not that I'm glad that that happened, but starting with something so abrupt and stopped us in our tracks, it really taught us that everything is figure outable, to have that really hard experience first. And I often reflect back on it because if something else that feels major happens, I'm like, oh, remember when you didn't almost have a business because of a lab contamination? And it makes everything else, feel a little bit easier.
Yeah, I mean that really is crazy. And I think I would have just went into the bathroom and crawled into a ball and cried. Like, what do I do now?
Yeah, I mean,
But,
there definitely was that moment.
yeah. And I also feel like you kind of almost appreciate it more because you're like, all right, the trials and issues that you faced early on are really what kind of are like, we're doing this, we're gun ho, like let's just get it. And it's I feel like people always talk about the success and how you got there, but they don't always talk about the journey it took to get there. And a lot of times as entrepreneurs, when people say things to me like, oh, you're so lucky to work for yourself, or it must be so great to be the boss. And, I'm like, it is, but it's not easy, and I'm fortunate, just like you're fortunate to have the success that you have, but it's a journey and there's a lot of ups and downs and there's a lot that goes into it that people don't realize and understand. And something like that could really throw a wrench in things for you. And make you feel like giving up before even starting. And there's a lot of no before you hear yes, you know? So I'm glad you didn't give up,
100%.
you know? How did you come up with the name?
So originally we wanted the name to be Gym Hair, and that was taken.
Hmm.
So SWAIR came from sweaty hair, and it obviously conveys a lot of trust with the customer just hearing the word swear. We've had Vogue say they swear by swear, which is incredible.
I love that.
There's a lot of puns you can do with it, and which is, just from a content perspective, always really helpful. And I'm glad we didn't go with Jim Hair, because when we think about the bigger vision for the brand, we would really love to be the go-to hair and body brand for an active customer. So I always tell, like when I'm pitching an angel investor or something like that, I say we want to be the Lululemon of hair and body. So when somebody says they're starting a workout routine, you know some of the brands they're wearing, you know some of the supplements they're taking, you know the shoes they have on their feet. But if you were to ask what shampoo and conditioner or hair products are in your gym bag, you would have no idea what to expect. And we want to answer that question.
It's really cool and very unique and a good perspective, you know, things that you guys think about that some other people in other industries might not think about. But it is, especially with, you know, a lot of influencers and stuff. People want to know every little thing that they're using and what is in their bag and stuff like that. And it's really interesting to approach it that way. But I love it and I think that's great. You know, part of that is getting noticed and getting your name out there and getting your brand out there, especially being so new. So what was the initial mindset and your approach to, you know, marketing and media and getting swear out there to build brand awareness?
So that's definitely one of the toughest things as an entrepreneur in this current ecosystem, because there's so many different ways to approach it. But I think because I had a luxury fashion background where traditional magazines and media was very important, that's what I felt very comfortable with. And I feel like even though it may not necessarily drive sales, it does drive awareness. So we worked with traditional PR, and we had initial coverage in some trade magazines, but also we had Allure very early on. We had Glamour very early on, People in Espanol very early on. Some really great publications that, even though if your core customer isn't reading it, if you have on your website or in your Instagram bio, as seen in Allure, as seen in Glamour, as seen in Vogue, that carries a lot of weight
Yeah,
with the consumer still, even if they're not necessarily going to those magazines for their information, they see it as a seal of approval. So that was
yeah,
really important to us. And the great thing about it is, even though we've been fortunate to get press along our journey, but some of those publications we did only get, one coverage from, but it's something that you can take for the life of your brand. So even 10 years from now, if we were never in Allure magazine again, I can still say as seen in Allure. So I feel like there's a lot of longevity and um, a lot of trust that comes with traditional PR. So I think it's a bit untraditional in this day and age to lean in there, but that's what we chose to do, and I still feel great about the choice.
yeah, I think it is really great and it helps build credibility, you know, like you said. People recognize those brands and those magazines and those names. So like whether they're reading them or not, they're saying, okay, like I know who this is. They were in there. It must be a reputable product, even though it's new. Um, how did it feel? You know, I know you're mainly a direct to consumer brand. How did it feel starting to make some sales and where did you take it from there? How, you know, how did you grow from there?
Yeah, so it's always very exciting as a small e-commerce brand, and most of us are on Shopify these days for our back end, and you see the sales come in, and most of the people have the same last name as you, or went to school with you, or whatever. It's all friends and family, and then you start to see people that you don't know, and that's very exciting. I think for us, a lot of those initial sales did come from press and from people word of mouth sharing the product. And one place that we leaned in early was with fitness instructors, because we know that they may not have a ton of followers, especially if they're at their local bar class in a suburb of Salt Lake City, some small places, but they have a very dedicated audience. And as you mentioned earlier, people want to know like what's in the gym bag of somebody who's really
Hmm.
fit. So we leaned in a lot to fitness instructors kind of as our first layer of helping get the word out. And because they didn't have a ton of followers, we were able just to do it for product swap. And they shared it with their clientele, and they're working out multiple times a day. So if they say, I use this between classes, that really resonates with their clients and people that are taking their fitness classes. And because of it was during COVID, a lot of people were getting larger than normal audiences on their digital classes than maybe in person. So that was, I guess, an unattended benefit for us.
Yeah, definitely. And, understanding where to really put your efforts, your energy, and your money is important, especially in the early days. So, how do you determine which activities, to really focus on or to invest in? There's product development, there's marketing, there's operations, there's new products, there's new packaging, there's different sizes, being a sustainable brand. I'm sure there's also new and innovative ways to keep that sustainability and to keep everything all natural. And how do you determine where to focus and what to do next?
So this is the single hardest thing about being an entrepreneur, and something that I really do struggle with day to day. There are so many things to do, and in addition to your own to-do list, you're constantly getting inbound emails from different people who have the next way to improve the conversion rate on your website, or people are coming up with these new apps and platforms all of the time and reaching out to you, and it all sounds so exciting. I really just am a person that needs a lot of structure, and I work with my co-founder to decide what our priorities need to be for the next week and month. And then I schedule time in my Google Calendar. If somebody besides myself were to look at my calendar, they would think that I was either the most important person on the planet or just like a complete psychopath.
I'm the
Because
same way. Everything is in my
yeah,
calendar.
everything is in my calendar. So I've found it's really picking the one or two things that need to be a priority in that month, and then blocking out time to focus on them. And another thing that I've done in the new year is leaving Mondays just completely for deep work and not taking any calls or any meetings on Mondays. And that's really been instrumental in helping me start my week in a really productive way. And then when the
That's
rest of the week
great.
gets chaotic, I already feel like I've done a lot. So I think it's really just having blinders on and trying to stay focused in whatever way that works for the
I love
individual.
that. I love that, no meeting Mondays.
Mhm.
It could be hard, I'm sure, but sounds like a really great way to start your week. And to ensure that the work that you need to get done is actually getting done. So, that's always really good. And with all of the outreach and everybody wanting to work with this amazing product, how are you kind of cutting through the noise, and how are you, figuring out, okay, this makes sense. Let's invest in this, or let's bring on this partner, or let's test this technology. And okay, maybe that's for next year, or maybe come talk to me in 6 months, I do think while branding is important and awareness is important, you are trying to drive ROI too. So it kind of somewhat goes hand in hand. You need people to know who you are to buy. Um, but I work with a lot of startup brands, medium-sized brands as well. It's not the easiest thing. And a lot of times we'll start off small and work with our brands to grow them as they see the ROI. But I've worked with a lot of brands too who are like, we've been burned, or we worked with this thing and this didn't work, or we tried this and this didn't work. And it's very discouraging, I feel like. So while it's a necessary, need to get your product to the next level, it's scary when it's not something that you're familiar with or you know a lot about or you feel equipped to be able to make those decisions with. And when you are trusting in a partner and that falls through or doesn't work out, it can make you very skeptical of moving forward. How do you figure out who to test and who to work with? And when those things don't work out, like what do you do next?
Well, I think that first you just have to make a lot of mistakes. I think a lot of people start a business or start their journey and assume they're going to find a path where they don't make mistakes. And it's really, I call it entrepreneur taxes because there were
I like that.
situations where I thought I was making a really smart decision. It could have been like, for example, we worked with a freelancer that came very highly recommended from another brand that saw tremendous success with them. And for reasons that I didn't understand at that time, having to do with our average order value and our repeat customer rate, their services did not work for us. And Stefanie, I'm embarrassed to tell you that I spent $30,000 over six
Wow.
months with this freelancer, just assuming at some point they would figure it out. At some point, things would change. And it happened. I don't dwell on it, but I learned so many lessons about understanding what the metrics need to be, understanding that success is not guaranteed, even if they helped your friend make $3 million
Right.
in a year. Um, really understanding the risk. And I think we've made big mistakes, that probably being the biggest, and many smaller mistakes. And I think you just kind of learn to suss out what works for your brand and to suss out some of the BS. And the
Mm.
stuff that I've had a hard time with is there's a lot of things that might even be free, like speaking very transparently, like the shopping website Flip, which people post videos to, and they're encouraging people to shop from their video. And it's free for a brand to set it up. And I spend a lot of time setting up our brand, the photos, integrating everything with our backend on Shopify. And then it just didn't work for a whole variety of reasons. Some stuff that maybe we didn't put enough TLC into continuing that relationship, but also a lot that was happening with Flip at that time. And like the time wasted is almost as heartbreaking as the money.
Yeah.
So it's kind of making those decisions like, okay, if I do, like, what is needed from me? If I'm paying somebody or even if I'm doing a free service, what do I need to invest from time and money on top of that? I think has been the biggest game changer in identifying what might be worth the risk and what isn't, because I think nothing is a sure thing and you don't know what's going to work. So you have to take the risks. Um, but yeah, if we figure that out, I'll tell everybody and we'll all make $1 billion.
Yeah, I mean that's really crazy and an interesting story because you do have to live and learn. Not all brands are created equal, and what worked for one may not work with the other. And people's skill sets could just be different based off of what they need to do for you. Um, but I do understand how you can feel a little jaded towards certain things. But as entrepreneurs, we, like you said, need to take the risk, but we also need to learn to feel comfortable to pass things along and then trust the people that are there to execute on our behalf. Because we're one person and we can't do it all of the time. And I feel like that's a hard lesson for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially when you're creating something like a product that's your baby, that you're so vested in, and that you have such a specific vision for. And looking to have that vision come to life isn't always exactly how you want it, but hopefully you eventually get to where you want it to be. Um, you know, how do you, being in the hair space, being in the beauty space, how do you utilize your strategy, your messaging, your media efforts to cut through the noise and differentiate yourself in the consumer's eyes? That has to be really hard as well, especially when everyone's like, "Oh, I use dry shampoo." And you're like, "No, no, 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 no. That's not what this is."
Yeah, that for us is really key to growing our brand. So we really focus on before and after photos and education about how the product is different and how to use it. So for us, a majority of our social media is just repeating those messages over and over and over again. When we have content creators help us, we provide a brief to make sure that they hit on all of those key points as well, because we found that really what works best, and obviously tweaking it a little bit, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or editorial or in an email blast, showing the before and after, and then a video to cover the middle. Like, how did she get from this gross, sweaty mess to this beautiful hair? You know, what was the process and how did she do it? And when we do that well, we notice a big difference in sales. And we're still figuring out the nuance about what makes a successful before and after and what doesn't. But it's really fun to play around with. And when it works, it's great.
Yeah. And I'm sure, what works on one platform might not work on the other as well. So you have to be specific like that. And, how are you deciding what platforms to utilize the most? Have you found there to be seasonality between certain platforms and things like that? Um, and what do you consider when you're thinking, okay, what are we going to do next, or what's the next media for us?
Yeah, I think that in terms of platforms, we're not doing anything unusual. We're really reliant on Instagram and TikTok at this point. Um, I think we've learned a lot about TikTok and what works there, and that it's not necessarily the message coming from the brand, but it's about other people on TikTok talking about you. And on Instagram, that's also very important, but people are looking more to the brand as their touch point. They're interested in what other people are saying, but they're also really interested in what the brand is saying and how the brand's presenting themselves. So we've learned that at least for our product, and we're hoping and working on, making the right content to resonate. And we really haven't delved into TikTok content creators, so that's something that we're actively focused on as we go into the next quarter.
That's great. And I think that's a very insightful and good strategy, for a lot of our brands as well. The TikTok influencers and content creators and TikTok shop has been working fairly well. So I would assume that for a brand like yours, especially generating that buzz in that community, should be a good strategy for you. You've mentioned a partner a couple of times. I think there's benefits to it and challenges, right? I think for people that are solo, it's hard, right? And you're like, okay, is this idea good? Am I too close to this? Am I thinking of everything that I need? But then sometimes, working with somebody or having a partner could also, while it could be helpful, could be challenging because you have different ideas on what you should be spending money on, or how the brand should look, or where you need to take this, or what's going to happen next. How is working with your partner been both helpful and challenging? And how do you feel that that has helped push the brand forward? Because I know two different personalities are challenging, but sometimes it's also helpful.
Yeah, I would say for my experience and hopefully hers as well, I could not imagine doing this on my own. One, of course, for having somebody else to shoulder the load, but even just for the emotional support of it, I think we're really good at pushing and pulling each other when we need it. There's so many great moments, but when it gets tough, it can feel really tough and really personal. And for one of us to be able to pull ourselves up and be like, it's just another day, like, let's keep moving. I think that that's been the best benefit. And one thing that I tell anybody who is starting a partnership, we paid a lawyer who was way too expensive for our budget to help us make a partnership agreement and really ask us the difficult questions that is now all in writing. Like, based on the time and money that we each came to the business with. What do you each think you should own? And what happens if one of you wants out? What happens if one of you becomes incapacitated? What happens if one of you wants to sell the brand and the other one doesn't? We got put through the ringer before we even had one line of code on our website. And I think that that's super important and something that I tell everybody, because I couldn't imagine not knowing the answers to those questions at this point, because sometimes it does get really tough, not necessarily between the two of us, but just the business
Right.
in and of itself. And just kind of knowing all of the worst case scenarios in the back of my brain just makes it easier for me to operate. So that I think is super, super important. And I knew her for 13 years before we started the business, and just knew that there's many people I could not work with, but that she is somebody that I can. And we're both really honest, and we both are accepting of honesty. And I think that that makes for a great partnership. Like, if one of us needs to, stop taking this personally, or like, I know that this sounds great to spend money on and it feels amazing, but like, let's look at cash flow. Like, can we really afford this? I mean, that's always her saying it to me. Let's be honest. I'm always the one that wants to spend the money. She's the one to
But
save
it's
it. But
good. You balance each other out.
yeah, I think the fact that we can both be very honest and not take it personally is like the most important thing. And we also don't work together every day. And I think it makes us appreciate the days that we are 24/7 together. Having the days where we're separate, we can each have our heads down and work in our own spaces, and then come together to talk about, what we've been working on, or to work through harder things together. It's like a really good yin yang. And I know that that's not for everybody. And I consider myself super fortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that it was really smart as well, because I've heard of so many business partners parting ways on bad terms, or, business having to shut down because they can't figure out what's next, or how to move forward, or one person wants out. And I think just like a marriage, sometimes you get into it, and you plan on it being forever, and you never really know what's going to happen, but at least you have your prenup, so to speak, where if something happens, those questions are already answered, and it's just easy. And I'm sure that it kind of takes a load off of you guys too, of the what ifs. And I think knowing each other is great, and being able to play off of your strengths and weaknesses are really great too, because it's not easy. It's not easy running any business, and being able to have somebody to confide in and help and bounce ideas off of is great. But like I said, it could also lead to extra opinions and cooks in the kitchen that could also be a little hard. So roles and responsibilities are amazing, and coming to those compromises are really important. Um, for aspiring entrepreneurs that are looking to launch a consumer brand, what's a piece of advice that you would give regarding, the mindset, what to consider, and, what the time is like to put into this, both from just like getting the product out there, but also from promoting it, and making those strategic decisions of, okay, now we have this. This is what we need to do with it.
Yeah, I think that the number one piece of advice when you're making a consumer product is listen to the feedback of your customers. I think that there are a lot of people that get very attached or defensive about certain things with their product. Maybe it's a food and they don't like one of the flavors, or maybe it's makeup and it stains your clothes. Like, I think a lot of people are like, well, you need like, and I'm a victim of this as well. And I think that, the sooner you listen to your customers and adapt, the better. And going in with the mindset that this is not going to be the final version of your product. And hopefully it will be in the market for many years to come. And you're going to be doing those new and improved 2.0, which is an experience that we're currently having at SWAIR, that people love our product, but we also know ways to make it better now that we've been in the market, and it's something we're actively working on. So I think just going in with that mindset that you're putting something out that's amazing, but it's going to change. the packaging at some point will change, the formulation will change, the flavor will change. So don't go in being like, I'm going to launch this to the world and everybody's going to love it and it's going to be like this in perpetuity. Um, and I think in terms of making the decisions about how to get it out there, I really feel like experimenting is just kind of what you have to do. I wish that there was a cheap and easy answer, but there isn't. And I think it's just trying different platforms, trying things organic, trying things paid if your budget allows for that. But one thing that I've been learning is to fail fast and not be attached to it. So that horror story that I told before about spending the $30,000, had I not renewed the contract, and I know people are like, oh my God, she renewed the contract. Had I not renewed that person's contract, being like, well, now they know the product, it's going to be better for the next 3 months. I wish I just would have cut my losses and moved on and not, been like, they're going to get it right. I think that was the most valuable lesson is, try something. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work and move on and don't necessarily try and fix it or believe in the sunk cost fallacy that, oh my God, I spent $30,000. Of course it's going to work. It's just, experimenting and moving on. And never put all of your eggs in one basket because laws change. Businesses get sold or get banned. So we're learning all of this stuff. So if something's working really well, invest deep, but always be looking for the new frontier. And that's something that we are actively working on at SWAIR.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's some really great advice. I think it's really, you know, I always say you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know it until you learn it. And so sometimes taking that leap, I do think you should have cut your losses a little bit earlier than 30,000, but you live and you learn. And you're like, okay, like we spoke about this, and maybe they'll do this next, and maybe they'll do that next, and maybe this will work. And especially when you have a friend and they're like, oh yeah, like we made so much money and we did this and we did that. Like it's a little hard. I get it. Um, but it really, that advice is really helpful. And I thought that this conversation was really great. And I thank you so much for being here. As we come up to time, I love to end our episodes with two fun questions. So what was your first job ever?
Like ever, ever?
Ever, your first paying job?
My first paying job was an assistant counselor at a kids' day camp and I had the kindergarten group.
Oh, that's fun and challenging.
Yes,
I'm sure.
it wipes me out every day, but it was really fun.
Yeah, that's so nice. And if you could choose a different career, anything in the world, dream job, what would it be?
I think I would want to be a social worker.
Oh,
I
that's a
love
hard
what
job.
it's a hard job and I love what I do at SWAIR. And at this point, I couldn't see myself doing anything differently and have huge dreams for the future. But I'll be honest, I'm making something for a customer that has a certain disposable income and is on social media and paying for expensive workout classes. And my alter ego sometimes wishes that I had a way that I was very tangibly helping people with my
Hmm.
day job. And it's something that I'm working on in my extracurricular life is a way to kind of give back to the community. But yeah, I think there's part of me that craves that a little bit more.
That's so nice and so thoughtful and selfless as well. But look at it as you are giving women clean hair after working out. So you are giving back, just not in the same way. But Carrie,
Exactly.
this was
Saving the
really
world one
amazing.
sweaty scalp at a time.
Yes, I love that. That should be your new slogan.
Mhm.
Where can our audience find
Mhm.
you if they want to continue the conversation, learn more about the product, or even purchase the product?
Yeah, we are at Swear Hair. So Swear is spelled like hair, SWAIR, on all the things. So swearhair.com, at Swear Hair on social media. And I'm Carrie at swearhair.com if anybody has a reason to reach out directly. Always love to chat.
Awesome. Well, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
This was so
And
fun. It's like a
yeah.
e-commerce therapy session.
Yes, here for you anytime you want to vent. But thank you everybody for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please comment below if you want to continue the conversation or reach out to Carrie. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, everybody.
Thank